Welcome to the Day of Wellbeing. Today I want to talk about the trauma of isolation. Quite a heavy topic, but quite an important one for many, particularly if you're experiencing chronic illness. So I've been through this and I think I might have a bit of light to shed on it and maybe some insights I can share. So we are social animals, right? And human connection is really important for our well-being, our survival, our mental, physical health, all the rest of it. So we need a certain amount. Different people need different amounts. There's introverts and extroverts. Although apparently my research has shown that isn't so much about how much you like spending time with people. It's actually more about how you recharge. So an introvert will recharge in solitude, and an extrovert will recharge in company, like going out to the pub or something like that. Introvert might recharge in the woods on their own. So it's not so much about whether you like company, because we all basically like a certain amount of company, some more than others. But the point is we need a certain amount. And when we become ill, it can be quite hard to get sufficient social contact to maintain our mental health. And it's a bit of a trap because, well, for one thing, right, generally, if you're ill, you have less energy. So it becomes harder to kind of attend the events where you're going to kind of brush shoulders with your, with new people and with, familiar faces, make new acquaintances. If you have quite a debilitating illness, you might be more or less housebound. And it makes it very hard to meet people in that situation. So then I suppose what you might then do is look around to your social situation, existing social contacts and think, well, okay, well, hopefully they've noticed what's happened. It's like I've fallen down here. I need someone to help me get up again. And you reach out, which is what I did. I reached out. When I reached out, I was in quite bad need because as well as the debilitating physical illness, it was very hard for me to do a lot of the practical things I needed to do. And a lot of that burden fell to my partner, who also has a job and had lost a lot of the support she was getting from me previously, and, did amazing amount of support. But this is another thing, is I don't think people realize that it's not just the person who's ill, but it's if they're in a partnership or their family who is also seriously compromised. So we would hope that we're kind of on enough people's radars that if something like that happens, they'll notice, and some people will step in and maybe take up some of the slack, like maybe offer a bit of practical support, offer a listening ear, etc., etc. However, this insight that I had today, which I think is a really key insight, and it's probably really obvious to a lot of people, and it's really obvious in hindsight, is there is a fundamental asymmetry going on from someone who is in quite severe need, I suppose, kind of socially because of whatever reason, and people who are just, getting on with their lives, who are maybe very happy to see you as and when you show up, but they're not necessarily needing you in the same way that you're needing them. And this can create a lot of problems because from the perspective of someone who feels that they've fallen down a hole and they've broken their leg, and it's like people are walking past and it's like, have you seen me down this hole? I've broken my leg. Could you please help me get out? It can be traumatizing. And some of that is the thought process around it. It's like, these people should be more forthcoming. They should be more aware of my plight, more willing to help. And I'll talk about that in a minute a bit more. But there's also, I think there is a genuine social pain that comes from that situation, where because we are these kind of social animals and we have this kind of interdependent culture and, just the kind of the way we've evolved, being mutually dependent, then it can actually be traumatizing if we don't get the contact that we need, not just because of the kind of layers that we have through our judgments and expectations of others, but on a more fundamental level, whereby it's like, actually, I'm not getting enough, enough love, basically, or enough care from my fellow human beings. Even if you're in a partnership, your partner's also, probably quite isolated, probably quite exhausted, carrying the kind of weight of two people's needs, while probably having other responsibilities out in the world. So it's an interesting one. So, there is a real tendency I'll just give a little bit more history. So I reached out when I got really ill, and some people were more than willing to be there for me in an amazing way, particularly in terms of emotional support. I use the Samaritans a lot, but also people that I already knew, friends, basically, acquaintances and friends, who were willing to kind of be at the end of a phone and be there for me and talk me through some of the really difficult stuff that came up in response to being debilitated by a new physical illness that had gone on. I thought I'd be over it in a week and then a month and then a year, and it just went on and on. And that has a lot of fallout in terms of your mental health. So some people were there for me. But what I noticed was that there was inbound support and there was outbound support. And these are my terms, I made them up. But outbound support, which is in and which is out, depending on your perspective, right? So for me, inbound support would be someone ringing up and saying, how are you doing? Is there anything you need? Do you need some help with the washing up? Do you need some shopping? Whatever. Practical or emotional offers of practical and emotional support. Or outbound support for me would be me ringing up and saying, could you be there for me while I talk through what's going on for me emotionally, or what have you, asking for practical help. And I found that some people were willing to be there in terms of like in response to a request, but far fewer were willing to be there in a kind of inbound, going out of their way to offer practical support, emotional support. And I found actually there's a really good community service. It's what they call tertiary care. So it's not even funded by the government, but it's called Moreland Care. And I actually had worked for them previously as a volunteer, so I was aware of their existence. And they have this befriending service, which I think they're having trouble funding now. So, that's something to quite an important thing to be aware of is, how these organizations like the Samaritans, etc., get funded, and, making sure we've got those structures in place for dealing with social isolation. But that's another story. But anyway, this person became, she befriended me, and she came around once a week, and she has done for the last year or so. And it's been amazing. She helps me do juicing to make, nutritious drinks out of spinach and fruit and stuff. And we talk, and it's just like a bit of social contact that I don't have to initiate because she's coming to me, So that's wonderful, and there's been, one or two other people, but this is where the line, there's a line, because of course we want to be grateful for what we have, but there's also the severity of the situation. And I've made it quite clear through various posts on Facebook, in conversations I've had with people, just how severe my need is. Again, invisible illness, if you don't understand invisible illness, just understand that the person you're seeing now, the energy, the health level you're seeing now is not the full story. And it can be day and night, how different I am. Within the same day, I might be lying down, terrible symptoms, unable to get up, unable to look after myself. So invisible illness is confusing. And that's one factor we can maybe challenge our thoughts with around having been abandoned or neglected or what have you. And of course, people have their own lives and their own priorities, and that's fair enough. However, it is difficult when you have this kind of hope, this expectation that, because for me, for oneself with a chronic illness or with kind of additional needs, it's so obvious and so extreme, the level of need, that people don't kind of jump in. And it's a really fine line, because, there's this thing about, if you're with me during my hard times, and then, you'll be with me during my good times, kind of share the whole journey kind of thing. And there's this real balance between accepting that people have very good reason for not being more proactively supportive of people in need. They've got busy lives, they've got, we live in this culture where people have to earn a living and all the rest of it. And, we're kind of invisible, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease, okay? So you have to keep squeaking. But what I think a lot of people don't realize is when you squeak, when you kind of make these requests, these vulnerable requests, like, could you please help me? It comes at a certain cost. It's like, because this kind of usual kind of reciprocal mutual nature of human interactions, if it's always one person saying, making the effort, initiating, asking for help. And I'm not just talking about dealing with the difficult stuff, because obviously that's challenging for people, and it's confronting. They don't always have the training, they don't always know what to do. But I'm talking about just casual social contact, like, maybe you're not having a terrible day today, would you like to go for a walk? Would you like to have a chat? Would you like me to come around because you got fatigue? I'll come around and drink a cup of tea and go for a gentle walk or something. When that doesn't happen, there's a certain amount of resentment. And I think it's important to be not too quick to kind of push away that resentment and kind of rationalize it, because it's genuine. It's like, You know, people say, I've got friends who've got MS or acquaintances that've got MS, and they say, you know, people just lose interest when they, you know, they initially they show interest and then they just fall off your radar because not a lot of people are in for the long haul. And obviously it's a big ask, right? A big ask, depending on your context, on your, you know, your point of view. But at the same time, it's fellow human beings who were once friends, and, you know, you may find yourself in the same situation. And then I think part of the problem is people haven't been in that situation of such extreme need, and so they can't always relate. So that's another mitigating factor. So I suppose what I'm saying is I'm walking this line between, on the one hand, understanding that there's this radical asymmetry. You know, I'm in more need. People don't need me as much as I need them. I have to be vulnerable, keep making requests so that they remember me. And on the other hand, like, what? Why? You know that I'm in a hole. You know that I've, you know, got a broken leg or whatever, metaphorically. You're just going to carry on walking past. You know, you're not going to. And it's really painful. It's genuinely really painful, and it's traumatizing. Partly because of the thoughts we add to it, and partly just because of the fundamental nature, like I said earlier, of, like, you know, we're social animals, and that kind of basic mutuality hasn't been met. That kind of, you know, being cared for by your community, or, you know, living kind of tribal awareness or whatever, is just somehow not there. And there's probably all sorts of kind of systemic reasons for that. But it can be overcome, or at least mitigated, by personal commitment to helping others, whether it's friends or strangers. So I've been a Samaritan. I've been on, you know, worked the lines, stayed overnight and listened to people, coached them through their, you know, their painful emotional processes. And I've been a befriender. And, you know, we do have the possibility within the confines of our busy lives to be actively kind, actively compassionate, not just responding, but kind of going out of our way to kind of help others, be aware. And like I say, you know, it's a judgment call, and, you know, I can't really judge others. I know what it's like to have a lot of demands on my time, or need to make money, or simply not have the resources. So it's not so much that I want to kind of moralize about it. It's more like, can we just please raise the awareness that there's people that so need our help, particularly with chronic health conditions, but also, you know, mental health, or whether it's like financial difficulty, you know, people that can't feed their families, and so they're going without in order their children can eat. You know, it's like just that kind of mutual awareness, social awareness. For me, it's worth so much more than all the kind of praying at church and, you know, being like having all the talk. It's like out there in the community making a difference to the best of our ability. So, you know, I think this kind of isolation trauma is something we can help ourselves with by reframing, by understanding. But also we need to be compassionate with ourselves and recognize it's a real thing, and it's very painful, you know, and learning to really self-care, self-comfort, and, you know, just raising awareness of that, the plight of many people in similar situations. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like this material, and I'll see you in the next video.